Yeah, that's a great transition to Cuba.
Yeah, I mean, it's well, in Cuba, it's real, all of it though. It's like people are calling it an embargo. It's not an embargo. It's a blockade. And I think that it is an important distinction because we're not at war with those countries. We're that this is not an act of war. It's just us being us. I mean, it's a crime, it's a war crime, but you can't call it an embargo. That almost makes it legitimate. It's not. It's a blockade. But yeah, what's going on in Cuba has been going on obviously for a really long time. What is it you think that recently, what has been the recent situation where it's been like really coming to the surface again and you see this very much a divide, especially we see it in South Florida. And it does seem generational. This like the younger Cubans are not wanting the same thing is what it does seem like to me. I mean, what do you see this coming from, like this recent sort of like surge of this?
Well, let's look at the top 3 sources of revenue for the Cuban government. Amazingly, number 1 was sending health professionals around the world, as they've been doing for decades now. And many countries paid for those services, or sometimes it was the United Nations agencies or other vehicles. And that brought a lot of money into Cuba that was used for paying for the healthcare system. The second source of revenue was tourism, which had become a very big industry, especially when Obama lifted the restrictions and you saw these enormous cruise ships coming into the ports of Havana. The third major source of income is remittances, like it is for most countries, not only in Latin America, but all over the world, where people migrate from poorer countries to richer countries and send money home to their relatives. So these were the top 3 sources of income. Between COVID and sanctions, every one of them has been closed off. The US has strong-armed countries to send Cuban doctors packing. That was done under the Trump administration, and continues today to encourage countries not to accept help from Cuban doctors. Second one of tourism, the Cuban government had to close it down to try to stop the COVID spread. And the third, remittances, was stopped by the Trump administration. And then Biden hasn't done anything to change that. And so what you see is a bankrupt country. And so, of course, people don't want to stand on lines, endless lines to get food. They don't want to go into the pharmacy and find that they can't get aspirin. It's terrible. So they go out on the street. And while it's been manipulated to say these people don't want food, they don't want medicine, they don't want vaccines, they just want liberty. Come on, people want food, they want medicines, they want vaccines. And the number one way that we in the United States can help them is by lifting that blockade.
That's an excellent point. And, it's like, as you like to say, working backwards from your conclusions.
Right. Well, they blame all of those things. So all of those things you listed about people having to wait in lines and just not being able to get what they need, that is what they say. Oh, well, that's because they're communists. See what happens in the communist country? They have to wait in line for things. They don't just get the things. And it's like, we know that that's not what the issue is. I mean, whether or not they're communists, we could talk about whatever, but that's not what the source of the issue is as to why the people are suffering. So those two things are not connected. But
yeah, and then
can I also say, sorry, one other thing, just to recognize people are suffering all over the world.
Yeah.
People are suffering in Latin America. I was recently in Bolivia, some of the poorest people that don't have food and that chew on coca leaves because that's all they had. In Peru, if you go out into the rural areas, people are suffering. People in Haiti, my goodness, talk about suffering. So it's terrible what's happening in Cuba, but you know what? Nobody's starving in Cuba. There is at least a ration book and the basics that keep people going. They want more and they deserve more. But let's put it in the context that all over the continent, there are unfortunately a lot of poor people who need a better diet, who need a better roof over their head, and in some places don't have any roof over their head, and who need health care.
Yeah, and that's, of course, what it comes down to. I mean, you can have any argument you want in regards to whether you agree with the socialist/communist government that is in Cuba, but you can't have a legitimate conversation until you end the embargo and lift the sanctions. And there are people that we talk to down here who suggest that, well, no, you have to eliminate the government first, and then we'll take the sanctions away. It's just this. That's first of all, that's American exceptionalism. That's a privilege that you think you're entitled to basically determine the rights of another country. You know, because we're the world's police, even countries that are 90 miles from our most southern point. You know, that is the power of the corporate media. And you're seeing it right now because, again, we're in Florida. You're not far from here. You see, obviously, Wasserman Schultz, who basically still runs the Florida Democratic Party, being front and center with the Free Cuba movement.
Yeah.
Then you had Biden step in and say the same thing. And now you're seeing it from Val Demings. You're seeing it from Nikki Fried. They are running to be the next senator and governor of our state, respectively. And they're playing right into the GOP's hands, hook, line, and sinker, as far as I can see.
Absolutely. I mean, they are just disgusting. Their policies are to make people go hungry. And that is just unconscionable. And to see how the Democrats, like the ones that you mentioned, they somehow think that these right-wing Cuban Americans are going to start voting Democrat. They're not. They didn't vote for Biden, and they're not going to vote for Biden. And so why is he catering to those people? Why are those the voices that he's allowing into the White House? Why are those the people that are getting all of the play in the U.S. media, instead of people like our friend Carlos Lasso and the Puentes de Amor, Bridges of Love, who walked over 1,000 miles from Miami to Washington, D.C., just to meet with Congress and people in the administration, and found the doors shut in his face for the most part. And so it really is, Biden is now tightening the sanctions. And so he says, all right, we're going to put the sanctions on these individuals. And the right-wing Cuban Americans are saying, that's nothing. That's nothing. We know that that's just symbolic. Come on, give us more, give us more. And so what kind of cycle has Biden put himself into now? He can never win with these people. So we have got to do a lot more to demand that Biden listen to the voices of rationality. And I think the whole framing of this has to be Biden has taken the Trump playbook, and instead of following in the diplomatic path of Obama. The path of Obama led to a flowering of free enterprise, and that's what we're supposed to love, is free enterprise in Cuba. Cubans were better off, good relations with the United States. Everybody was happy except for a group of Cuban Americans in South Florida who will never be happy until they get to go back and take over everything in Cuba. But anyway, we've got to say, why is Biden following Trump's policy instead of Obama's?
Well,
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.